This year all closed, no?
Oh, yeah. Is Glühwein Austrian or German or?
Oh, please. Is Beethoven Austrian or German? And is Hitler Austrian or German?
Okay. Ooh, sing,
Ooh, that's a bad one.
You know, that's the biggest coup in modern advertisement history. That the rest of the world believes that Beethoven is Austrian and Hitler is German.
Well, we'll have to start a campaign on that one.
Glühwein, I don't know where it comes from. Somewhere where they have wine and where they have cold at the same time. Maybe not in Italy.
Exactly.
But the oldest Christmas market in the world is in my hometown in Germany. But everything closed this year, I think.
Oh, is it even everything?
They're locking down here again. They will announce probably later today.
Just a heads up to everybody. We'll kick off in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Mike, hörst du dann auf oder machst du nächstes Jahr weiter?
Ach, sporadisch, vielleicht einmal im Monat oder so, ja.
Ja, ich höre auf, glaube ich.
Aber der 13. sieht gut aus. Das Programm ist interessant und du hast eine gute Rolle.
Welches Programm?
Am 13. Die Show schon am 13. Januar.
Ja, ich moderiere diesen, ich habe vergessen, der mit dem Doppelnamen, der ehemalige Chairman von Shell. Ne?
Mark Moody Stewart, ist ein guter Freund von mir. Ja? Nein, nicht Freund, er war mein Chef, aber ich kenne ihn, ja.
Kennst du ihn? Diese These, ja, der erzählt ja das Gleiche wie ich im Prinzip, habe ich festgestellt, ne? Mit den Low-Cost-Producern, die nicht so weitermachen können.
Low-Cost-Producers, that's his big thing, absolutely. And he's obviously one of the longest-serving board members of Aramco as well, so he's, what he says carries some weight.
Yeah, I think this, I was always wondering where the Saudis get their ideas from. Maybe that's, we have to talk about this offline.
Ja.
Bin ich jetzt ins Englische gefallen und du bist Deutsch geblieben?
Nein, ich kann wieder auf Deutsch überschwappen, aber wir sind doch jetzt allmählich live, oder? Sean, are we live?
Yes.
Good.
Ja.
Sudden silence. There is no trust among people.
Well, we have that's the topic of the week. I think we have we've moved beyond the line of ethics and into the unknown. Okay, well, let's kick off the Daily Energy Markets Forum. We're every Sunday, and this being the last one of the year 2020. Ding, ding, ding. Where we take a chance on Sunday mornings to review the week that has been. Mike Muller, head of Vitol in Asia. Let's kick off with you this morning, Mike. Again, for the 6th week in a row, oil prices finished higher. I have to start out by saying I'm completely and utterly startled and very concerned that the markets completely disregarded what was an attempted coup in the United States last week. And I hope to God that the future won't show in retrospect that the markets and the sensible world were asleep while the lunatics were knocking down the asylum. That's my starting pitch. I've been waiting all weekend to say it. Mike, over to you. Not to try and set you up to take that on. I'm not asking you to take that on. That's
if you'll forgive me, I will stay away from any lunatics in North America and focus on markets. I do think it's fair to say that across the field of commodities, we have the feeling of a bull run here. Now, I'm not saying that means that oil is going to go punching through from 50-ish to 60, but if you look at various other commodities, there is a strong sentiment of support. I mean, multi-year highs on various metals, for example. Even Bitcoin has gone and joined the party. So that euphoric feeling in the market, as with all markets, is based on sentiment and a forward view of things, which is why futures contracts are called futures. We have.
But I push you, Mike, on that and say, are we entering, or have we already, or will we in 21 perhaps, another super commodity cycle that was previously defined a decade ago?
I'll defer to a much more qualified guy and chief economist in Christof when he gets his turn on that one. But let me just focus my attention a little bit on oil. I mean, in terms of market movement and prices, I think we can stand by what we've said for the last few weeks, which is that OPEC sort of got it right, in that they have an oil price now that is sitting at just under $50, having peaked just above $51 during Friday's price action. And they have a market that is also backward, because we have to recognize that the month of November had headwinds, right? It had not only the customary end-of-year producer selling from certain large hedging programs, and of course, as we know from the data, good selling volumes in deferred back end of the market from people like shale producers. But it also was the month where the second wave of the impact of the virus manifests itself largely in Europe. And whilst Europe seems to have gotten on top of matters, so the lockdown measures have seemingly worked in most countries, it's still looking like it's not under control in some parts of North America. And therefore, we can't celebrate yet that we're entering into the phase of the vaccine. But despite all that, the market has gone higher. It's pretty much around $50 Brent. And you have to say, and we argue about this every single week, what is the equilibrium here? I mean, OPEC need backwardation. They want the back end of the curve to be too cheap for producers in the shale provinces to bring in more rigs and increase production. And they've accomplished the big objective by effectively, in this lower price environment, seeing US production come from just shy of 13 million barrels a day to 10-point-something million barrels a day. That is a huge reduction in output, right? But at the same time, people are still hedging. And the fact that there's good hedge volume going through in the mid to high 40s means that large tranches of non-conventional oil production in places like North America are economic at this price. And therefore, any ambitions or prognostications by various investment banks and consulting firms that we may be heading for a $60, $65 market in 2022 would have a big caveat there, because at the current cost structure, that means you will get a lot more production back, and that will take share off OPEC. And unless there's growth in outright demand, it's going to be a very small amount of increase on the market in terms of global oil demand if shale production were to come back in 2022 to the sort of levels that $60, $65 oil will call for. So that's the conundrum here. What is the right equilibrium to keep OPEC in a position to put more oil on the market and yet manage inventories?
Christof, Rühl, good morning. Again, another week of weakening economic data. Jobs numbers in the U.S., unemployment numbers again looking weak. What's your takeaway from last week?
Do you want an answer on your super cycle question? Are you serious?
I do. Well, I'd like you to get to that either first or second. Be my guest.
The answer is, oh, please. And I never understood what the word super means in super cycle in the first place.
Well, ultimately, it means every commodity, I suppose, is moving up because the demand on global growth consumes.
Okay, if that's a super cycle, what's a cycle
then? You tell me. I'm asking the questions.
These are just words. There's no super cycle. It's a Goldman Sachs convention.
I suppose super is meant when everything is slightly elevated. Like you'd say,
well, that's a cycle.
Tesla,
yeah.
The valuation of Tesla feels very super at the moment rather than just cycle.
It's true. It's not commodities, but anyway.
Yeah.
So commodities super cycle.
$100 oil would be super, I suppose.
With everything together, way above the previous heights, that would be super. And we're very
which is what we had the last time it was defined as super in the first half of this decade. $100 plus oil was considered a super commodity cycle.
Well, it was Goldman Sachs who called it super cycle and made a big bet and made a lot of money collectively.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But so that's one. The other, what Mike already mentioned on the oil price, they have similar problems with the equilibrium price in a dynamic setting, such as today oil markets. But leave that aside, I think that's basically right, except there is no conundrum. So we are now entering, if we are above 50, we're entering the zone where private producers, first of them, of course, shale, but also others will come back, where oil companies, Western companies will have slashed costs enough so that they can make money at these prices. And I would think we are then in this kind of area where we could meaningfully talk about a corridor, because it will not just be stalled. This is where we had last time in 17 and then early 18, the attempts of OPEC to manage supplies in such a way that they would just increase in line with demand increases while keeping inventories under control. And Mike's completely right. The thing they are looking at is backwardation. So the market needs to keep in backwardation. And that means that we are sort of very, very unlikely for any kind of sustained period to get close to 60, or not speaking, but breaching it. And will hover around these 50-55 range, with OPEC sort of delicately trying to manage markets without inventory increases in lockstep with demand increases. And that brings us to demand. and then again to this virus. If I look back at last week, I see 2 or 3 things. One, there is this battle between the second wave of the virus and vaccination. Not quite clear how it ends yet. I mean, long-term.
Well, we're hitting record in the US, at least, record deaths over 3,000 a day, and record infections climbing towards nearly 200,000 a day.
In Europe too. In Europe, the only country I'm aware of which is loosening up a little bit is Spain. All the others are talking of tightening. The German economy, I mean, the Germans having a meeting with the government this weekend, they're talking about tightening over Christmas, really severe, and the death numbers here are higher than they were in spring. So the European, and in the UK also, I think the European situation is bad. The US situation is bad. Only Asia is sort of in a state where they can start vaccination, and then they have reached the other side of the river, hopefully. But what is interesting is in Europe, the consequences are economic. So the question is, will that derail the economy, the global economy even more? In the US, the consequences are also about authority, because this is Biden's first shot. He will come in mid-January. He has already announced he will appeal to people because he can't mandate them to behave, keep distancing, wash their hands, and wear masks. We know that half of the Americans think that's a stupid idea. So this will be a question of his authority, whether he can control these numbers fairly quickly or whether we see them escalating. And if we continue them escalating, that will undermine his authority right at the beginning of his. And I think that's an important of his tenure. That's an important step. Other things which are important, 2 more. One, Brexit. We saw last week this meeting between Boris Johnson and von der Leyen, and I still believe there will be a compromise after the 115th extension at 5 a.m, 3 days after the deadline, something like that. But at the moment, it doesn't look very good, and it weighs on future prospects. It's something nobody wants to carry into the new year, but that's likely what's going to happen. The UK, I mean, look at that. They have the worst performance in terms of the virus and the worst performance in terms of the economic costs. Normally, you have countries where the pandemic is bad and the economy is doing better. There's that kind
and apparently today they're going to be sending their naval vessels to protect their fishing waters. I mean, it's
exactly. What do you do when you royally mess up? So first you alert the military to distract, and secondly you save the world to distract. And that was my third point. They have also announced that they would stop financing support of E&P projects in oil and gas and coal and all fossil fuels abroad. It's not insignificant, given that they had government guarantees in the billions for not only BP but also for other European companies who could go there and get insurance if they would work together with UK companies. That comes hard on the heels of last week Denmark saying they would stop oil production. So these European countries are getting more serious and playing more hardball and stopping financial support for fossil fuels. That, of course, will lead to them not stopping to use fossil fuels. That will lead to them to getting all their fossil fuels from the Saudi Aramcos and Gazproms and Rosnefts of that world. And then there will be a harsh awakening one day far in the future, I think, whether that was...
Well, that sounds like a question for you and your interview with Sir Mark Moody-Stewart. Mm-hmm. Mike, last week, oil prices popped above 50 for the first time since the first quarter. And ultimately, my question to you, as you indicated in your first comment, that has the oil markets joined the equity markets and moving beyond COVID, that the COVID pandemic is now not a restricting, constraining factor on oil prices?
Yes, it's a very good question. I mean, we've dealt with the equilibrium in terms of cost and shale producers and hedging by US independents. But the bigger picture that we also talk about a lot is the wave of underinvestment in conventional upstream, which has clearly been slashed in the last year or so, and what impact that is going to have. I think the market is divided, to answer your question. I think some people feel that this is pretty much as good as we're going to get. Until such time as we brought inventories down to the 2019 levels, which was the objective of OPEC. And others, notably certain consultants and a majority of the advisory investment banks, seem to think that a push towards $60, $65 is very much still on the cards. But they are pointing to the underinvestment. They are pointing to a very solid demand recovery, notably jet fuel, which is the one product that must recover in order for that to be the case. And then you're calling for not just the inventories to go back to pre-COVID levels by the third quarter of next year, if you get that demand recovery. You're also calling for a market which might actually need to call on not just stock draws, but on supplies from countries that are not currently supplying the world. And by that, I mean 2 generally sanctioned countries.
Yeah.
So the other way of returning that supply to the market, of course, if the Biden administration chooses to keep those countries sanctioned, is to stimulate higher output from the shale. And then under that scenario, a higher price may actually be called for, provided you don't see Saudi and the UAE wanting to go straight to 13 and 4 million barrels a day, respectively, of course. Yeah.
Christof, although I began with the rather dramatic statement that I sort of made on the US political picture, but ultimately, without putting it into hyperbole, what happened last week is quite a significant. I mean, you have 20 states, you have 100 members of parliament joining what can only be described as an attempt to overturn democratic principles in the United States. On one level, one can laugh and spit it out. On the other level, one would have to say, is this another step in an erosion that has an inevitable outcome as you keep moving down this path? I'm wondering, is it a moment to acknowledge, to think about for the markets?
It's one of those moments where we have to hope that it will be forgotten and not be acknowledged 10 years from now as one of the stepping stones in the wrong direction. I agree with you that on the face of it, I mean, something like that looks really, really bad. But the other side, of course, is that the Supreme Court turned them down, even though it has a vast majority now, 5-3, I think, people appointed by Trump, and some of them pretty hardcore. So the institutions held the line. And my reading of the situation from a distance is that most of those who joined were joining for their own little political games and progresses within the Republican Party, but not in the expectation that they actually had a chance of winning. So I think a lot of the participants in that, and the supporters, vocal supporters of that lawsuit, were actually just preparing to be in the losing camp, but within their party in order to, not cut off their bridges.
I mean, the problem with that is we've seen in recent cases where those that have stepped across the Rubicon into the Trumpian universe of new facts, there's no way back. Once you're in there, you've crossed the Rubicon of black is white, blue is yellow, and you permanently have to nearly double down in order to continue to justify. So my concern is ultimately that this is going to be a very loud noise with Trump now, with his army of supporters, elected of government officials, that to continue to force them to double down into this space.
Yeah, but it's a waning force. No, I disagree. So you will see people leaving that camp, and it happened before, and it happened it will happen to others. And you're right, those who stay in there will have to permanently double down. But that kind of radicalization usually goes with a dwindling of numbers. And I think he is sort of fading a little bit. They will not go away. There will always be 30 to 40% for now, people are seriously disgruntled. But and they will make life horrible and administratively difficult for the Democrats and for the federal government, and all these things are true. But I don't think we are any closer to a coup d'etat than we were before the elections. Okay. I think it goes away, and then you will see Trump, also coming under attack in his gilded cage. He will at some point be too old and will push forward his daughter and her husband, and that will take away a lot of the appeal and the credibility. He will face countless lawsuits on private business matters. That will,
as you go forward, you're going to have to outright flank Trump in order to be a serious candidate on the right. Let's go to flip the coin towards next week and take a survey question a little bit early because I have 2 of them today. And that is, we've seen 6 weeks of oil price growth in the last 6 weeks. And my question is, will that trend continue this coming week? And if it does, obviously you have to close above 50, because I think we closed about like 49.97 or something on Friday. So will this trend continue this for a 7th week and close above $50 a barrel? Mike, over to you. Same question. Looking forward, this market has been, as you started out your comments today, on a bull run, clearly, and that's embedding across all financial classes, including oil. Will we go another week on this run?
We're giving our audience enough time to answer. By the way, on a technicality, the closing price for spot February ICE Brent was actually 49.97. But who's splitting hairs here, right?
Or 49.97. Sorry, did I say 59?
No, you said $50. It's a hard one. We've come a very long way, and I'm not sure the market's going to keep punching through on the strength of what we're seeing itself. Whilst we have products markets that are looking a little more encouraging, a lot of it is still expectation that the magnitude of the second wave virus was known. And I think that perception may be changing for the reasons that Christof articulated earlier, in particular in the US, where we haven't really seen a demand hit yet, but it feels a little bit inevitable that we might see a demand hit there, even though there's a wide view that large swathes of the population ignore the measures and keep driving as much as they used to. And that's borne out by the demand statistics we've seen. But I do think all is not rosy yet there. And indeed, as Christof also said, in parts of Europe. So I think the market could take a breather and consolidate in the high 40s, and that's for this week, and then await further evidence of progress, be it on the vaccine or be it in terms of statistics on what we refer to as the second wave. There are other things, of course, that are also influencing matters. I mean, I think we've had a fascinating run in gas markets. We've flipped from having a warmer than seasonal November and a outlook for the Northern Hemisphere heating markets, all three of them, that is, Europe, Japan, Korea, and also North America, that the winter is likely to be above average in terms of temperature and therefore lower on the demand side. But there's been so much by way of supply disruptions that the LNG price has done something rather astonishing. For oil watchers, this may have been off the radar, but $10.50 per MMBTU for JKM is a phenomenal number. At that price, calorific value adjusted, it is the most expensive fuel. And certain countries that can afford to burn other fossil fuels should stop burning gas. I mean, it's as extreme as that. It is equivalent to the oil price going to $100 or more, right? And the second thing is the green. Sorry, go on, Sean.
I was going to say, is that any kind of lead indicator?
No, it's entirely down to fundamental reasons in gas markets. Gas markets will rebalance if they can. And normally what would happen is if one part of the world gets strong, you rebalance from other parts of the world. But we have strength everywhere. Because of supply disruptions, and your transmitter is your shipping capacity. And if the shipping capacity is fully taken up, or there are delays in Panama, all these little factors have contrived to create a market that is now globally strong for the mobile form of gas, which is LNG. The other thing is the Green Deal. I mean, the European legislation, the 27 countries coming up with an agreement to take to take their emission reduction from 30-something to 55%. Sent the carbon price upwards to 31 euros 30 or whatever per ton carbon price. We've not seen that for many, many years, since the heyday, I think, in 2013 or so. So there's a major shift in thinking that the energy transformation is much more here and now than people expected, and accelerating at a pace that is faster than most anticipated. So there's a lot of stuff happening on the periphery of oil itself. Yeah,
Mike, if we get the news today that the Brexit talks have indeed, taking them at their word, they're going to announce today whether they're over or not. If indeed they announce that they are over and have failed to come to an agreement, how would that impact the oil markets, do you think, opening tomorrow?
That they're over what? Sorry, Sean, overproducing?
The Brexit talks are due to finish today. They're due to announce whether those talks are over or not. I'm wondering, all indicators are that they have come to an end of the road. If indeed that is the case, does the oil markets care, or?
I'm afraid it's even worse than IMO. It's long forgotten history, and for Asian oil markets, be that the Middle East or Far East, it is not relevant to supply and demand in any way at all. Of course, there are certain wrinkles like free trade agreements, which have in the past seen some adjustment of values for North Sea produced oils that can then go to Korea on more favorable terms due to FTAs. But no, in the big picture, not of relevance to the oil price as far as I can see. Of course, everyone's going to be watching the anniversary notifications that Boris and Rishi Sunak are going to be giving to the party faithful on the first anniversary of their election victory. But beyond Europe, I don't think this is of all that much interest. And yes, sadly, I think that we will be down to WTO rules for most nations with which the Brits haven't yet struck an accord.
Okay, let's take the survey question or the answer before bringing Christof back in and see where the sentiment is in the room for the coming week. No, the trend continued this week and close above 50. No is the response, 60-40. Christof, your thoughts about the coming week and what might be guiding the markets, and does this oil run, as it indicates here, run out of steam?
No, I think no, it's not running out of steam. And remember, what the hypothesis here is not that prices are collapsing back. The hypothesis that it will be very difficult to manage it from north of 50 because of the private sector supply response, but not impossible. If OPEC keeps cutting, then prices may overshoot. They may go to 65 or higher and then just come back crashing later on. That's the issue. It's not that they can't go higher. Otherwise,
I suppose they could take a breather after 6 weeks.
In the short term, yes, I think I would agree. It doesn't really matter whether they end at 48 or 52 now, sort of for the bigger scheme of things. And this is a short-term thinking, which is, I think, even Mike would find impossible to forecast. So as long as there's no dramatic up or down, I think we are fine. We're in the same kind of upward trend, and that trend will be maintained as long as OPEC holds the line. And that holding the line will be increasingly difficult as the supply response is triggered elsewhere. That's the basic.
We see the Baker rig count again this week up another 20 rigs or so.
That's correct. I want to point out something else which is becoming relevant if we look a little forward on the economic side. Is we have seen quite a dramatic situation in terms of, we have seen a massive uptick in savings rates. So a lot of people were sitting at home, not spending any money, not going on to holidays, and saving a lot more. I mean, savings rates are now 16, 20, 25% of disposable income. They used to be 6, 7, 8% of disposable income. This money is slashed up, and it's either going to continue, which will make the recovery much harder because people don't spend if they're worried about the future, or it's going to hit the economies in its diminished capacity all of a sudden, and it will continue to contribute to inflationary pressures, which we already see coming through the supply chain and the shipping lanes and all of that. That's an important component. Another one is that there is a sizable segment in the poor countries anyway, but also in the rich countries, of people for whom this does not apply because they lost their jobs. They live on government handouts. They were not sitting in the warm home office during getting full salary during the first months of lockdown. So this Corona thing will further make income distribution unequal and further sort of increase the gaps which we had developing over so many years in Western societies. I think it will be very difficult to repair all of this at the same time, to smoothen out income distribution, to prevent inflation from going to. So I think we will see in 21 some phenomenon which are pretty new, and inflation may finally arrive, and that may be one of them. So that's something else to watch beyond next week, admittedly.
As this is our last Sunday of the year on the show with Mike and Christof, I wanted to sort of take a quick pontification on the whole year ahead, 2021, which of course will be the defining theme of our forum on January 13th. But I want to take the opportunity today to ask Mike and Christof just generally what they think 21 looks like. Let's go to the second survey question to set that up. And the second survey question is, what will be the average price of Brent crude oil in 2021? Closer to $40 a barrel, closer to $50 a barrel, closer to $60 a barrel. What will be the average price of Brent crude oil in 2021? So welcome your thoughts on that, and then we'll go to Mike and Chris for their kind of big picture view of 2021. Mike, you could get first bite at the cherry. What does 21 look like for you? Straight line up, everything's great?
No, I think we're in for more of the same in terms of unexpected twists and turns. On the supply side, I think Venezuela will not feature. I think Libya cannot get much better, but it could go back into reverse. History tells us so. And on Iran, I am personally not of the view that we're going to see too much Iranian oil in the market because it's just not a priority unless fundamentals get so tight that the market calls for it and it's seen as the right thing to do. So that is very much an option for the Biden administration. On the demand side, which is the much harder one to predict, I mean, you were mentioning before, many people are coming to the Emirates to spend Christmas there. Some air traffic is open, but until business travel fills up the business class cabins in airlines, these jet consumption figures won't go markedly up. And that's the one big thing.
Just on that point, Mike, this is a Dubai thing, obviously, but all of the hotel resorts on Palm Island are at 95% occupancy at the moment. And at the Atlantis, which is the biggest one at 1,500 bedrooms, is at 95. I mean, it is a kind of an extraordinary recovery just in these recent weeks. And the border between Dubai and Abu Dhabi is opening on Christmas Eve. That's another sort of heads up. But sorry, just wanted to put that in.
I mean, that's a great underpinning in terms of those that want to be more confident in the market.
It's before me even traveling there.
I mean, I hear the Maldives are open as well, but there are some people, of course, who would rather not end up contracting the virus on a plane and then in being in a country where the medical facilities aren't excellent. Of course, the Emirates has excellent facilities, so that is a magnet, and it has the critical mass and scale to provide for a good holiday under most circumstances. But there are holiday destinations that are still empty, and there are other places where tourism is domestic only. So on the demand side, yes, I'm relatively upbeat. I do think OPEC will succeed in meeting their objective of bringing inventories down to manageable levels. And I think I've said in the past that does not have to be the pre-COVID levels, because in terms of days cover and in terms of inventory that needs to be filled, strategic inventory and fill for new refineries, that figure may well be a slightly higher new normal in parts of Asia, but it will be a slightly lower new normal in parts of Europe where demand continues to recede. So I do think the market is in the process of being managed, and we'll continue to see a stock draw as the overriding phenomenon. It's just a question of whether the virus-riddled winter period in the Northern Hemisphere will allow that stock draw to continue, or whether it plateaus or even sees a slight increase in stocks. But the bigger picture is that inventories should come down and markets should stabilize in a new normal. The only question is, what is the economic balance of things? And we discussed that about 20 minutes ago. 50 might be that number. Yeah.
Let's go to the answer of the survey question. Give Christof the last word today. Oh, wow. Closer to 50 is the overwhelming view. I suppose that's the safe answer at the moment. But nonetheless, it probably feels a little bit like that. Christof, your sort of big picture view for 2021?
Yeah. So on the oil price, I'm happy to report I'm in the majority camp. I think that sounds like a reasonable number to balance it out there. I think for the big picture, with Europe being in survival mode, with Asia and China economically, pushing ahead, powering ahead, and then making up a lot of ground to the leaders in Europe or income leaders or the US. The key to what happens in 2021, in my view, lies in the US. And it could go either way. It could be that Biden from the beginning sort of uses his stimulus money wisely, gets lucky on the virus and the vaccinations, fixes economic and political relationship with Europe and with China quickly. And they could be on a roll, and that would be good for the world. But it's just as easily conceivable, coming back to your point about the political situation and the unrest there, it's just as easily conceivable that he calls for a lockdown, nobody obeys, that he tries to schmooze up to China and they give him the cold shoulder and renege on the trade agreement because they think he's not as tough as Trump, and because they have been through enough with the US and because they have made up so much economic ground. And that his stimulus program sort of ushers in a bit more of an inflationary period and a bit more social unrest because of missing income distributions. And his guys in the economics team are certainly not known as inflation fighters. And he gets into trouble. And that would be bad news for the world. I think on balance, the outcome will be positive. I do think as we open the door to 21, that saying is smile, it could be worse when you come out of 2020, and I smiled and it got worse. I don't think this will happen, but it's a close call. It's a 60-40 situation. And the key will be in the US, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it could, I suppose, in that sense, hardly be worse. This to sort of follow on from you on that, Christof, that I think the elections in Georgia will dictate a lot to what the political outlook landscape for 2021 is in the US, if indeed the Republicans hold the Senate or the Democrats by some miracle take it. that could dictate where the tone of travel goes in the US. Well, that's it for a wrap. I have to finish by putting on my sound. Oh, Jesus, 2 minds thinking alike. Well done, Mike. You didn't get the memo, Christof. Not that I sent one. Not that I sent one. I had to do it.
I show you something German instead. Look.
Yeah, a bottle of Glühwein. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Have a Merry Christmas. Yeah, I remember.
On that note,
I remember I had a German girlfriend when I was at college, and I went to her house at Christmas, and she had live candles in the tree.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's pretty unique to have live candles. I always remember that in the Christmas tree.
I have this argument with my present wife every year. I want live candles, and I'm not allowed to just because it might burn the house.
Yeah, it's just some little detail like that it might burn the house down. Mike and Christof, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys this season. It's been great insights, very valuable every Sunday. We'll take a break on the Sunday show and return on the 10th of January, just ahead of our forum on January 13th. And in that regard, any last comment? No?
Just wanted to give a shout out to Adnot Global Trading and congratulate them on their first physical transactions, which I am told they transacted today. So well done.
Oh, really? Oh, great. Well, they're going to be featuring on the forum on January 13th. Khaled Salmin will be our feature guest, and that will be interesting. Can register on the LinkedIn link. We'll post the agenda on the WhatsApp group tomorrow, and encourage all of your colleagues to register on the LinkedIn because it's easily accessible there. There will be a Zoom access to all sessions at the forum, but it can also be watched on LinkedIn as easily as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Mike and Christof, have a Merry Christmas. Everybody else, I look forward to seeing you during the course of the week. Until then, all the best. All the best. Shukran. Thank you.
Shukran. Have a good one. Bye-bye.